February 11th. Thank you, Stephen. I'll do a roll call. Joe,
Aye.
Rob,
Aye. Here.
thank you. Chris,
Aye.
Jill, here, Peter,
Here.
Denise, here. Okay. Is there anybody else on? Is Joanna on yet?
No.
Okay, all right. May I have an approval of the agenda?
Steve Moore is here.
Oh, Stephen Moore is here. Okay,
moved.
Stephen,
Here, thank you.
thank you. I didn't see you. Perfect. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Made by Peter, seconded by Jill. Roll call. Peter,
Aye.
Jill.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Me. Aye. Okay. There we go.
Jeremy just joined.
Okay. Thank you. And then, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Okay, seeing none, seeing no hands raised, I am going to close it for public comment. Okay. So first up is article, it's agenda item 4, discussion, deliberation, and potential motions for warrant articles for annual town meeting 2025. It's Article 26, appropriation fiscal year 2026 Community Preservation Fund. And here to present is Linda Williams. Thank you, Linda.
Hopefully you all got the report today.
No, we don't, we don't send it out before. It's always
Right
sent
up
in the
there for
screen.
them.
Oh, there.
This
it
is how we
Yeah,
always do it.
okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty self-explanatory. We had a lot of requests for historic preservation this year, so we spent $2,724,420 on historic preservation.
We're gonna scroll, let Stephen get to this where he can scroll on it. There we go. So do you want to go through the big ticket items, Linda?
Biggest ticket is St. Paul's. We've been involved with, I've been on it for 24 years and we were, St. Paul's we've worked with St. Paul's from almost the beginning, along with the Methodist Church, Unitarian Church, the Congo Church. We can't work with them as churches, but as historic resources. And so this is, they need to protect the church. They were looking for an HVAC system and a sprinkler system to protect everything we paid for, which is the windows, the addition, the all kinds of stuff are there. The bell tower is the biggest expense. So this should pretty much tighten up that building, and then I don't think they're coming back after that. Dual McIntyre did a very good job on stewarding St. Paul's to this point. The next one is Housing Authority. It's under historic preservation according to the state, CPC up in Boston. The interesting thing about the Housing Authority money is that this money is going to be 2.5 times by the state and matching funds.
Okay, cool.
So they're giving us another 500 to 700,000 back on the previous grants to the Housing Authority. So that works out beautifully. They were built in 84 and 85, and some of the other structures were moved in the 90s. So they're in need of help. Ryan Mitchell, we've worked with every year since the beginning. We're continuing to work on the observatory on Vestal Street. This is just more of the same, it's the roof this time. A Landmark House, we've been rehabbing that for a while. We've done the windows, we've done other stuff for them. And they needed that whole back ramp rebuilt because the concrete is disintegrating, and that is the handicap access in the back. Remain is an interesting building. That's the building, the odd building, one of a kind, actually, on Nantucket, right on the corner of Main Street and Orange Street. We gave them money last year to do an exploratory review as to what's wrong with the building, and this should get the building tight to weather. It's not going to be the complete project, but tight to weather. NHA is all sorts of stuff going on over there. We've been working with
Hang on,
NHA.
Let's Stephen catch up with you.
Next page.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, there we go. We've been working with them since the beginning, also on various projects. As you know, if you go by the old mill, that's the project from this fiscal year. The back wall of the candle factory, the old Whalen Museum, is being shored up and repointed, and that was from this past year as well. This is 7 Fair Street. We need to replace the roof, the leaking skylight, to protect everything we paid for on the building. The other one is for the Greater Light, which has been sort of neglected for a while. So we're working with Greater Light to get that back, especially the ironwork and the roof. Nantucket Town Clerk, this is an ongoing thing about preserving their records. They still have a little bit of money left from a previous grant. They send stuff down to Browns River and we paid for the storage shelves in the vault. So they're copying and digitizing their historic records. So it's pretty cool. Just to see the stuff they've already done. So that's historic preservation.
Okay, let's ask the committee if they have questions before we move on to the next section. Does anybody have any questions for Linda on the first part? Jill?
Just who owns the Remain property? Is it on the corner?
Yeah, it's condoed. Remain owns a substantial portion of it, but they're all involved with making up the difference for what we did not pay for. So it's kind of an interesting building. It was all owned by one person at one point, and then they started moving pieces out into a condo type of situation.
So then who gets the money?
It's managed, I believe, by Remain, because they're the ones who put the application in on behalf of everybody in the building.
Jeremy has a question.
Jeremy?
Yes, of the $2.7 million in this subset, how much of that is funded by the town and how much comes out of some of the state, I guess, fund for community preservation?
It's easier to answer that question after we go through the three sections, because then Brian can speak to the $4 million figure and where all that comes from, rather than try to separate it into different sections.
Okay, well then, one last question is it a different mix in each of the three sections?
No.
No. We get a certain amount of money back from the state. Minimum of 10% has to go to historic preservation, minimum affordable housing, and 10% to recreation, open space.
Mhm.
Obviously, we exceed those amounts. Open space is the hardest one to actually get to 10%. But it comes back in a lump sum from various places. State matching grants, things like that, and that is then divided by the CPC into the different sections. So it's never the same amount in each section every year, but a minimum of 10% of that 4 million has to go to each one of these sections.
I understand. I'll hold my question.
Okay. Next is community housing. And even if we, just as an aside, even if we don't spend the 10%, because we don't have any applicants under that section, we still have to allocate 10% of the funding to that line item, and it just sits there. So many times under recreation and open space will amass quite a lot of money in those sections. So when someone comes for a big ticket in that section, we have the money just sitting there from year to year. It doesn't expire on June 30th. It keeps rolling. Community housing, Interfaith Council is something we've been funding for a while. I mean, almost from the beginning. It's for rental assistance. Portable Housing Trust Fund. I believe, Brian, that's to pay off the first bond,
Yes,
the 350.
correct.
So that was 730,000 allocated in that section.
Any questions for Linda on either one of those? Jill?
Yes. What percent, do we know what percentage this money is of NIFRA's overall budget? Like
What?
the Interfaith Council, are they
Oh.
giving us?
Oh, I don't know what
NIFRA?
percentage of
They
their.
get money from all over the place. They get money from the
Usually about,
Community
I
Foundation,
think
et
they're-
cetera. So we're a substantial base for them.
Yeah, that's
I
what I
think their
thought.
total
Yeah.
budget's about, I remember it being
Over a
about $1 million.
A million.
Two or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
was on the-
1.2, something like
I'm
that.
on CRC together and I
Yeah.
just.
yeah. I
Because they
think
get
it-
money from CRC, but, because I'm in that right now, and we gave them money but it can be used among the three things that they manage.
Right. with
This
those
money
that-
can only go
food
to the
bank.
housing part of it. And it's gone usually by March.
Is
It's the whole
Joanna
year.
on yet?
Yeah.
Joanna, do you remember the food rental, blah, blah, the interfaith? Do you remember what their annual budget is for this year?
The Interfaith Council or the?
Yeah.
How, the whole
Yeah.
thing? No, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I can look
We'd
quickly
have
and
to go
tell
back and
you.
look.
That's
You know
okay.
what? I have it right
And
here.
Joanna's recused from this article because Mariah Mitchell is
That's correct.
okay,
Okay,
Give me
right.
1 minute and I'll be right back to you.
okay. Carry on.
we get open space conservation recreation. When we first started out with in 2001. There was only open space, and then then as it moved along through the years, you could do a small percentage for recreation, but now because there's so many recreation things that are involving open space, the legislature changed it so it can be either open space or recreation or a combination of both. So it doesn't matter. There's no restrictions on it. Nantucket Lighthouse School. They are right adjacent to the bike path. They've got drainage issues, and to help that, as well as the water that pockets right on that bike path section, they're creating a rain garden with educational pieces in it, which is gonna be open and accessible to those coming by on the bike path. So it was a new type of funding that we had this year. But it's gonna be.
Hey,
open to
Denise.
public, Gonna have all kinds of plants in it. It's gonna be really well done. So it should provide some education for people.
Hang on a second, Linda.
Yeah.
Do you have to recuse now, Stephen?
I do, yes, I wasn't aware of that, so I'm recusing from this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
Nantucket Racket and Sports Association, we've been just sort of stockpiling. You can stockpile on various projects because you can't get the entire funding. So they will just keep putting in and putting in and putting in and putting in until they can get enough money, which is something we've been doing with a lot of these entities for some years. So the Racket Club, they got what was left. We gave them about the same amount last year, and they had money from before that. So now they have enough money to start the project and do the infrastructure and the engineering and all the rest of it. So I expect we'll see them again next year, but it should be towards the process where they can actually build them.
Question on open space, Chair.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Does this clean up the balance, or do you have a balance carried forward still in open space?
I don't think we have anything
You
in
have
open
no
space,
balance,
because
okay.
there's a lot of money that went out last year. And that is pretty much it. Then we are required to do 10% or 5% for
5%.
operating costs, our office, our phones, all that stuff for staff. And we've allocated that. And then our total this year, we tried to stay around 4 million because we don't really ever know when we start this process exactly how much money we're gonna have. So we're $4,054,420 this year. We are the most active one in the state. Because we signed on to it. There were only like 3 that signed on the very first time, 24 years ago. And we have been one of the most productive and active because we happen to have an awful lot of historic resource here that most other towns don't. But we used to get 100% match back then. Now it's down, Brian, I don't know what it is now, but it's way below 50%. Because Boston came in, Springfield came in, some of the big towns and cities came in, which lessens the amount those of us from the beginning were getting. Because we were getting an awful lot of money at the very beginning. So now we just make do with what we have, which is about 4 million. The last couple of years, it's been about 4 million. So, we sort of count on that. Only one did not get funding this year because they had a significant amount of money they have not spent on other projects. And we weren't entirely sure going forward that somebody needs to take accountability for that one. Who will go nameless at the moment, but I'm sure they'll be back next year.
Peter and then Jill?
Yeah, I've always been kind of perplexed on why we give money to private entities for this. And then I understand to preserve an historic building or something like that. But why do we give money to the new school,
Lighthouse School,
or Lighthouse School?
it's the project. It's a 501c3. It's a project. It's an open space project that the public is gonna have access to. A lot of what we do, the public has to either in the public domain, like the Remain Building, a significant historic resource right on Main Street, or the public has to have direct access to something. And this was a very interesting open space project where the public has direct access or right from the bike path.
And what percent will the school be paying of the total?
I don't know, they've got other issues that they're paying for. We're just doing the open space part of it, and they're making up the difference anyway, because a lot of these projects, we're not the sole source funder. They have other grants, or they have other fundraising projects going on, or it's part of a much larger picture like this. St. Paul's does a lot of fundraising on their own. So we're rarely sole source funder, except for something like the town clerk's records. Rob, the assessor, has a money that he wasn't quite aware that it was still there. That's sole source funding, because they're absolute projects. Or the taping of people that are still alive over at the NHA. We did a lot of the records of people before they passed away, like Edward Stackpole, stuff like that, and digitized a lot of that. So that's one-shot deal. So we have a lot of one-shot deals in here, but we have other people that we've worked in with, like St. Paul's, Mariah Mitchell, Landmark House, those guys that are ongoing projects, because the sheer volume of their holdings is so huge, like NHA. They just don't have the resources to do 22 properties, especially that back wall of the candle factory, which has been doing this for some time. So, we contribute a substantial portion of that money, percentage of that money, but then they have to raise the rest of it. Because we don't pay for contingencies. We don't pay for overruns. We don't pay for certain things because of lodging or travel or project management. We don't pay for any of that stuff. We pull that right out of the grants. So these may have, a lot of these may have asked for more money, but they're actually reduced by certain things that we just physically, we can't pay for. Now, the one time we do pay for a project manager is a St. Mary's building on Orange Street, because you can't rely on the priest to manage that project. Because there's expertise involved that he just
Not to
does not
say
have.
anything on that one.
No
Thank,
face.
But it's gonna be stunning. It's a one-of-a-kind building. It's half Victorian, half Queen Anne, and it's beautiful building, and the public does have access to that building. And a lot of these guys have to, all of these have to, Brian can talk to that, all have to sign agreements. We monitor them. There's project managers for all of these, and we have to sign off on the bills to make sure they're within the scope of the application. So there's a lot of oversight on these projects.
thank you. Jill, you had a question?
I just want to, do you still have an office separate from the town offices?
Yes, and Brian knows that I've been trying to get into the town to have some accountability for that office and stop paying rent and phone, which irritates him. But we're finally on the town system. So, yeah, we'd love to get a space in town.
Gotcha.
But we don't care if we have to share the space, because she doesn't have to be in there every day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're desperate. We want to get out of where it is.
Thank you. Joanna, you have a data point for us?
Sure.
If you're talking, you're muted.
Yes, great. So the FY 26 budget is 1.220500.
Okay, thanks, Joanna.
That sounds-
Okay, Jeremy and then Rob.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for Brian. Of the 4,054,000, what percent of that will be the town of Nantucket funding?
Doesn't actually work that way, but it's. Put the thumbs down. I don't have the numbers.
Well, let me rephrase it differently then.
No,
How
I'm
much-
gonna tell you in a second, Jeremy. Hold on.
Yeah,
I just
don't
need to
have-
do the math on, right, 2 seconds. About 82% is from the town.
So the state fund is 18% of the $4 million?
Roughly, yes.
Well, explain where the 82% comes from. It doesn't come out of the town general.
Well, I
fund.
mean, right, so it's not town general fund funding, though. It's a 3% charge on the individual's tax bills that goes directly to CPC. So it's not a charge in the general fund that pays for this. So it's a 3% charge on the individual tax bills.
And how has that fluctuated? If it's 82% this year, how's that fluctuated over the past few years?
Well, it's been declining, as Linda said, because I think 10 years ago when I started, it was probably closer to 40 or 45% town and 55% state. And as larger communities such as Boston, Lowell, Worcester,
Springfield.
and Springfield have joined and realized the benefits of the program, the amount available to distribute to all the communities in the program has steadily diminished. For many, many years, while I would have been here, and probably as Linda's been on the committee, there used to be more than one distribution, and those second and third distributions used to be only to the communities that had adopted the full 3%, which originally we were one of the few communities that had done that. Now there's only one distribution a year, and so there's a greater reliance on the 3% surcharge on the tax bills.
And
Just on
so what is the full amount of the 3% surcharge the town has available?
We're estimating $3,354,420.
Okay, and then anything beyond that would go into the general fund, but it's not necessary yet.
No,
don't go with
no,
that.
anything, whatever the surcharge is, if it's more than that, ultimately, that was the assessor's best estimate based at the time on the tax, based on where we were in setting the tax rate for this year. Anything more than that would merely go into undesignated fund balance in the CPC. It would not go to the general fund. The general fund does not receive any benefit from the 3% surcharge. It goes strictly into the CPC fund.
Right, no, I was thinking of the converse of if the 3% is not sufficient, and then does the town have an
We would
obligation?
never,
We don't spend more than
we would never, ever, I would never advise the CPC that they had more money to spend than we believe that they could bring in.
Okay, so we have 4 million is spent, 18% comes from the state, the rest comes from our 3%. And we're
Mhm.
basically maxing that out. And then last question for Linda is all of these projects, it seems like it's just almost the same names every year. How is your marketing efforts to go out and to get new opportunities?
We don't market. We're a town entity, number one. Number two, word of mouth. A lot of times, we also have an annual meeting. It's moved around some. I think it was May this year. Last year, used to have it in August. We have an annual meeting where we do a bunch of ads on TV and the paper, et cetera, online. For people who are seeking information, and we have 3 of our grantees usually come and give a presentation. And then we send it out to everybody, all the entities, that we have a deadline coming. It's the first Friday of September. So
And
we do a lot
is
of
that
campaigning.
is that outreach effort, is it successful in attracting new entrants every year?
If there's a project, they come to us. We get a lot of the members, 9 members will get approached at various venues and asked questions. Do you think this project would work? Do you think that project would work? They know, it's pretty well known by now after 24 years, what projects we can cover and what projects we can't cover. So we get a lot of questions and we tell people, no, it doesn't cover this, or it does cover that. So it's an ongoing thing.
Okay, thank
Rob,
you.
have a question?
Withdrawn.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Chris,
Speak on this year, but Steven's recused, so, the last couple of years, I've been a big questioner of this program, given that it's just a workaround on the tax bill and where all the funds are being used. But the last couple of years, my impression has been the majority of the funds have been used towards affordable housing. And they do get into an interaction potentially with the general fund because we fund so much affordable housing out of the general fund. So, my preference would be to see this fund used 80% off the top at affordable housing into the Affordable Housing Trust. And then the other 2 categories dealt with the balance, since we have such a need in the general fund and in the general tax base on the affordable housing side. So I was surprised to see the historical part preservation be so high this year relative to affordable housing.
Well, we give money to people who apply. Number one. Number two, the CPC is carrying $10 million in bonds at the moment for affordable housing, which is going to eat into the amount every year because we have to service. When he pulls them all, he has to service them.
Mhm.
We also had a long discussion this year because the trust came to us again and asked for 10 million, which we can't do because we still got to get rid of the other ones. We did vote. It was contentious. We did vote to take another $5 million bond, which is, I believe, in a separate warrant article.
Article 28.
Yeah. 27 is the money coming back thing. And we did vote to continue to support it because the state was presented to us, and I've heard this from the people who've testified up there. The state is looking for a buy-in locally. Apparently the 6.5 million a year is not enough. Apparently the $10 million bonds we're carrying as a CPC is not enough. They wanted to see something current. So we voted to go ahead and pull another $5 million bond to go back to the state and say, yes, we are continuing to support this. Now, other towns are in better shape with doing affordable housing as a majority of their funds because A, they don't have open space, they don't have recreation, and they don't have historic resources that we do. We have more pre-Civil War structures still intact, lived in, than anywhere else in the country. So it's kind of an interesting situation. The whole town is not a museum. We're living in the museum. So certain things have to be supported in order to attract people to come here because we are a thriving historic community. So we do have to spread it out. We do have to look at every single one and then do them on the merits, whether it's historic preservation versus affordable housing. But every time the trust has come to us to ask another bond, we've given them the bond. And I don't see that stopping. But we can't, at this point, given how much historic preservation and open space we have to preserve and make accessible, like Linda Loring, we give money to them a lot to get their project out there accessible because they have such difficulty with the paths and the benches and everything else out there. So we have to take everything in total and not just focus on one thing and tell everybody to go
Yeah, I think.
jump in a lake, jump in the water.
I mean, I think certain of us would argue that a lot of the money we're putting into, or it's historical preservation, there are other sources for those funds, for those entities.
They're not. That's the problem. We always ask, where are you going? But the state, when you go to the Mass Historic, they give you 25 grand. That's it.
I hear you. I'm just not sure the Catholic Church needs the money more than I do on my tax bill. but
Well, they never come to us.
they
That
did.
was a one-off.
They did this
last
year. Because they
It's just an
couldn't do it.
example of where we're using this town money, but I've said my piece.
Well, I'm on the Housing Authority. I've been on the Housing Authority 20 years and I started the Housing Trust, by the
I
way.
am well aware.
So I'm well aware of affordable housing. I did the crazy shuffle for 12 years before I built my house. So I'm well aware of this situation.
Yeah, I don't, that wasn't my point.
But we
I
are
really
all in favor of
support
affordable housing.
yeah.
But that's why they supported yet another bond, because between the three, if they're all running at the same time, we're spending like 750,000 right off the top to service those bonds. I know Brian's gonna work with the numbers and stuff. But that potentially is what comes right off the top anyway. So there's not a whole lot left for anybody else because we have to service those bonds.
Okay, I'm cognizant of that. You have to leave us and we still have a couple more to go.
Yeah.
Jeremy, is it a quick question?
Yes, given what Chris was just chatting about, I was wondering if we did not take the 700,000 from the state or the 18% from the state, do you then remove constraints that allow you to spend the 3.2 million town money in a different fashion? And does anyone ever ask that terrible question?
No, because if we vote, we have to go back to town meeting to vote to leave the program and then we get no money. Period.
But at the moment, the 700,000 or 18% you get from the state gives you a series of constraints on what you have to do in this program, as I understand it.
No.
And
What mechanism would we use to capture the 3% if we opt out of the CPC?
it's a question I'm asking. I don't know the answer to it.
I think what Linda's trying to say, Jeremy, is we'd have to come out of the CPC altogether.
Yeah.
And it's not a question of, if we don't take the state's money, it's if we don't want to be in the community preservation. What is this, last C?
Act. It's a CPA.
Oh,
right?
CPA Act,
CPA,
yeah,
right.
right.
We're the CPC.
So we'd have to come out of it altogether as a community and then that would be and then there'd be no money.
But I also think that you would still be, we would still have to levy the 3% charge for
Something.
until the bonds were extinguished.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For what
Correct,
we've already
yeah.
had a liability, so we'd be levying a 3% charge until the bonds were extinguished. And then you would have no CPC, you'd no longer have a 3% charge, so you'd get no more flexibility if we withdrew from the program. Cause you wouldn't have you wouldn't have all the additional funds, we'd only levy the charge to pay the debt service.
So, okay, so would the bonds accelerate or they would stay at the same maturity?
They'd stay at the same maturity.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further questions? May I have a motion?
Motion to adopt the CPC funds for 2026.
Second,
Thank you. Made by Jill, seconded by Peter. Chris? Jill?
Aye.
Peter,
I,
let's see here, Jeremy,
Aye.
let's see, Joe,
aye.
Rob,
Aye.
and Denise, I, okay, thank you. It's unanimous of the people who aren't recused. All right, Brian, I think 27 is over to you.
27, actually, I think we need to
Placeholder.
table because we're still,
Oh,
the
coming up,
CPC is still
okay.
looking, and I think they will have some to transfer to reserves, but they're still finalizing
Okay,
what can be turned back from
So we can-
prior approved projects.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Stephen, let's move that to March 10th when we do all those kind of,
Should have a better
Thank
idea
you.
by then.
Which one we did, we're not.
we're not doing
That's right,
27?
they transfers.
Because we have to go back after every single recipient and find out if they've finished their projects and if there's anything left in there. Some, as Brian knows, have 1 cent kind of thing. But we have some that have fairly substantial amounts when you put
Yep.
them all together.
28,
So I guess I'll start this. I think Linda's alluded to it. Christie, the housing director, and myself attended a CPC meeting to discuss, as the committee is aware, CPC is very graciously and town meeting has supported the authorization for two $5 million borrowing authorities. There's about $1 million left to borrow on the second authority. The first has been fully borrowed and is currently in payback status. So it's important to note that the housing director felt it was really important to ask for this third ability to borrow an additional 5 million because the CPC, in their opinion, serves a very critical need on the island because it's limited to between 30 and 100% of AMI. So it has been used in a lot of cases to be a participant in acquisition of some of the land so that we can restrict some of those properties, some of the units that are being, for some of the RFPs that have been put out, to 30 to 100% AMI, which is a need on the island. So we went and discussed the possibility of the CPC considering using their borrowing capacity for affordable housing and asking for a third borrowing authorization in the amount of $5 million, which there was some discussion. I think that ultimately they agreed that it was a good use of another 350,000, which does kind of speak to what you were talking about, Chris. And they did favorably vote to support the article. So the motion is in front of you. It has been cleared by bond counsel. So the motion is to support another borrowing authorization, which would be paid back from CPC funds in the amount of $5 million.
okay, questions?
Motion to adopt.
Joe has a question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Joe?
Jumped the gun.
So is this a leveraging the 3%? In other words, the repayment will come from the 3%?
Yes.
Okay,
That's
so
correct.
it's not like the $6.5 million being left that, no,
No,
I got it. Thank you.
Jeremy?
Brian, what is the total borrowing capacity based on that 3%?
but we've never asked because of the way that they allocate the funds, Jeremy. I don't actually know what the total borrowing capacity on the full 3% would be, to be honest with you.
Well, it's $3.2 million this year. There's
Right, but they
already,
have to- Go ahead.
there's
sorry.
already 10 million outstanding and we're asking for another 5 million. So at the moment, they're pro forma, there'd be 15 million of bonds against that 3.2 million, if I have my
Right,
math
but
right.
Yeah, you do have the math correct, but the set aside is 350,000 on a 15-year amortization schedule for each anticipated borrowing
Okay,
is the way
all
that
right,
it's
so
been
the full
done.
15 million will be $1 million a year of debt service?
Roughly, yes.
Okay, so the 3.2 million the town spends into CPC, a
Mhm.
million of that now will go to debt service to free up 5 million for additional affordable housing. Is that
Well,
correct?
I would say another 350,000 would go for an additional 5 million of debt service.
Okay, I
Because the
understand.
other two have been authorized, so
Yes.
I would say the 350 is leveraging another 5 million.
All right, but do you have a sense, once this is done, can you come back a year from now and do it again, but, get up to
Yeah,
20 or 25 million?
I think that I could, to Chris's earlier point about the 80-20 split, I think depending on the amount of projects that come before the CPC, depending on what their willingness to allocate to affordable housing is, we could do any number of amount of borrowing. It's just it's depending on their willingness, Jeremy, to what they're willing to commit to debt service on an annual basis. Because you have to remember, going into fiscal 27, we will be immediately setting aside $1 million out of the total pot of money that we expect that they would have to allocate. So it really is dependent on what their comfort level is, what we would ultimately be able to leverage.
Yeah, that'll be the main governor, but I was just curious with the market, at what point do they push back?
The market being,
The bond market.
I don't know.
Okay,
Candidly, I don't know if there's a point of pushback from the market
Okay.
on that.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jill, you had started to make a motion before I realized there was
Yeah.
questions.
Motion to adopt, Article 28.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Jill, seconded by Peter. Okay, Chris?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
And Denise, aye.
Don't me, Joanna.
No, I can't.
Oh, she can't.
Oh, that's right. On the first one, you could have. All right. Well, you're recused for all of them. Sorry. I just recused you. You and Stephen are recused for 28, even though you didn't need to be. So, all right. But go ahead, Joanna.
Aye.
Stephen.
No, I really was gonna recuse myself. I might apply for Affordable Housing
You
Trust.
guys can do it.
or something.
Okay. Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
All right. So you're still recused. This is fun so far.
Fun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but what you might do in the future should have nothing to do with you accusing yourself now.
Well, just out of an abundance of caution, and I like how you all voted anyway,
Yeah.
so I'm not getting involved.
yeah,
To buy down.
let's
units
not get
and
into,
stuff like
let's
that.
not, let's move on.
Move on.
Thank you, Linda, for
Well,
being
thank you,
here.
guys.
Thanks.
All
Linda.
right. Brian,
Madam Chair.
over to you.
Thank you. So Article 10, which Capcom presented to Select Board and FinCom at a meeting recently, and I will say that the Capcom chair did a wonderful job with the report and presentation. Before you is the article, the motion, which does reconcile in the general fund and agree to what Capital Program Committee recommended. I would just.
And what was in the budgets that we reviewed on Saturday?
That's correct. Yes.
February 1st.
Correct, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
It totals $28,863,650 in the general fund. And it's made up of $1,889,000 through raise and appropriate. $5,785,000 recommended through free cash. $19,633,650 in borrowing, and $1,556,000 in capital exclusions, which do require a ballot vote, which will be on a ballot, for the total of $28,863,650. And if anyone does have any questions about specifics in that Stephen scrolls through, most, if not all of the departments are here to help answer any individual questions if anybody read the Capcom report as well.
Okay.
So I'm happy to answer any questions if I can as well.
So just a reminder, we have all seen this, and talked to the department heads.
Mhm.
And, I attended the capital committee's chair's presentation. So bragging, so did you, you were there too. Anyway, moving right along. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion, please?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Made by Peter, seconded by Jill. All right, and everybody's eligible this time. Chris?
Aye.
Jill?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Joanna?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Denise, I, it's unanimous. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I did want to make one note for not only the committee, but everybody who might be watching. On the town meeting website page, I think on the left-hand side, the tax impact calculator of the debt exclusions and all of the articles that you'll be discussing, 11, 12, 13, 14, is on the website, so people
Okay.
can go to it and put in their specific information, and it will project what the impact based on current data that we have is.
Okay,
So, okay.
great. Thank you. All right, 11. appropriation, town employee housing design owners project, OPM and construction costs. Who will be speaking to this one?
Rick will be.
Sorry, Libby, I didn't hear you. Rick.
Hi, sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Thank you, Rick.
So you're probably aware that for the last couple of years, we've been working on some plans for town employee housing in the 246 Fairgrounds complex. We brought an article to town meeting last year, perhaps unfortunately worded, which did not pass. People took it to be a feasibility study when it was really just design and construction. And so over the course of the last year, the housing office, along with all of the other housing activities they undertake, has been developing a plan for town employee housing on Waite Drive. We were focused on Tacoma at first, but have moved over to the Waite Drive area. The proposal is sort of there's 4 lots on Waite Drive that can be subdivided into 5 lots. Each of those lots can support a single family home and a duplex. And so we're proposing to develop 3 of the 5 lots with this appropriation. The single family homes are 3 to 4 bedrooms. The duplexes are each 2 to 3 bedrooms. And the costs is $12.3 million plus $1.7 million for design for a total of $14 million. I can take questions, kind of sitting in for Christy here, but I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Questions? Chris?
Rick, the 14 gets you through completion of construction of all those units?
No, sorry, I might not have said that properly. There's 5
No, I
units.
probably heard it.
We're proposing to develop 3 of the 5 lots. So the 14
Yeah,
million
so-
gets us 3 of the 5 lots, which is
6 buildings, 3 of which are duplexes, right?
yeah. So the total would be 15. When we develop all 5 lots, the total will be 15 units and as many as 40 bedrooms. This will be 2/3 of that.
But you think you can get the 6 buildings, 3 of which are duplexes done for 14?
Yes.
Joe and then Jill. Go ahead, Joe.
In the capital program report, they said that this was like $490,000 a bedroom. Is that a good number for the cost?
It would be, yeah, that would be about right. So, because the full program would be about $20 million and it's 40 million and it's 40 beds. So just on, $500,000 thereabouts for each bedroom.
That sounds to me like a good project.
Thank
You
you,
hope so.
Joe. Jill?
It's really just a comment because what Chris asked, I think. What Christie told the capital committee is that she's gonna come back for more money later. And
Definitely.
potentially, the same amount of money.
So, yeah, that's for the second phase. So remember, there's 4 lots now. I said we could subdivide into 5 lots. This funding that we're asking for here is for what we'll call phase 1, which is 3 of the 5 lots. So yes, to finish the project, we would have to come back for more money. And with the passage of time, it'll probably look about the same.
Is that what Kristen meant to, or did you mean?
She said she's
For the
gonna come
first
back for
part?
probably about the same amount of money, which
Okay.
isn't a win.
Right, so it's not 20, it's 28. I mean, I would suggest 14 seems really slim for the phase
Right.
1.
Yeah, I
right?
do. too.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to know that. Joanna?
Joanna?
When would this project start construction and when would it be finished?
So I don't know the answer to that question. We don't have a full design yet, Joanna. So we have some preliminary designs by Griffin Associates. And so I don't have an answer for that.
But what about, say, an estimated timeline? Like, what's your goal?
I'm going to say, so just based on, so it's modular design. And we've been at the dorm for, about I don't know, 9 months. And we still have another 5 months to go. So 14 months for the dorm. So I would expect that it'd be a little bit longer than that because they're individual homes. So.
Okay.
So the planets align potentially end of 2027.
Calendar year. No.
Yeah, calendar year.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
If you need more money, what's the mechanism? Come back at next year's town meeting?
It would be, the
Yeah.
mechanism
Or
would
you find it
be,
somewhere else or what?
no, the mechanism would be a supplemental appropriation that we would go through,
A year from now,
Or a special.
or a special. whatever.
if you knew by then.
If we knew by then, yes, but if not, then, yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes. Denise,
Go ahead, Stephen.
thank you. Rick, where can we see plans for this? You mentioned it's a duplex with 2 or 3 bedrooms on each side. Are we undecided about that? Or we're just not that far in planning?
So we have some pretty preliminary design documents. I could share my screen. I'm not sure how valuable it'll be, but I can show you what we have if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick, if you would.
I was afraid you were going to ask that.
I knew, yeah, exactly.
Where is that?
Well, that's because I don't have to share my screen with someone.
Yeah.
I don't even
got
bring
You're the smart
Okay.
one.
it.
So
Oh,
let
what-
me, oh gosh, there's too many things up here. So on the right here, you can see that, right?
Yeah,
A building without windows? Yeah. And on the right side, there is sort of this, the lot plan.
Yeah, right.
There, on the right side, there's the lot plan, and you can see what the configuration would be with the, that's there.
Where the
With
buildings-
there's 3 parking spots plus the 2 buildings, the single family and the duplex. Obviously, A plus C is the duplex and B is the single family. As I said, 3
Okay.
parking spots. That's sort of a design concept here. This is sort of a overhead streetscape. You see the three lots that we're talking about, and well, that's all 5 lots, in fact. So I don't know if we're going to start at the left side or the right side, but probably the right side and work down towards the dorm. That's the dorm on the far left.
Oh, okay.
And then this is kind of the street view from across Waite Drive. So those are the parking, that's the parking pad there, just behind the fence, and that's the single family and then the duplex behind it.
Where is Waite Drive?
Waite Drive is off the backside of the fire station, or one street, what is that, from Amelia? It's one street north from
Walnut?
Amelia, maybe.
I couldn't find it on my Google map.
It's definitely there. It's where we built the dorm. It's where you enter into the 2FG parking, one of the entrances to the 2FG parking lot directly off the backside of the fire station.
I know about where it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rick. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Made by Peter, seconded by Jill. Article 11. Jill.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
Jeremy.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Rob.
Aye.
Joanna.
Aye.
Denise, I, unanimous, thank you. Article 12, Public Works Facility Improvements Design.
I think Drew.
Is Drew here?
Drew Patno, the DPW director, is
Yep.
here, Madam Chair.
Great. Drew, over to you, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. As I'm sure you're all well aware, we are working hard to advance the design of a new DPW facility at 1 Shadbush Road. Stephen, if you could pull up the supplemental kind of attachment that I had sent you that shows the breakdown of, there we go. So this was actually a document that the Capital Program Committee asked me to put together, and it was a great idea because, this project actually goes back to 2015. And so this in blue text, you can see the appropriations in 2015 and 2018. and I won't go line item by line item, but there have been various contracts for condition assessment, feasibility study, site selection, environmental, rare species habitat mapping, et cetera, et cetera. But if you scroll down a little bit more, Stephen, at the bottom of the first section, you can see contract 2649. And that is a contract we have with Weston and Sampson, who's our architect and engineer for the project. That was executed at the end of 2024. We are in the middle of this, the design development phase of this project. So to summarize, to date, there have been a total of $2.55 million appropriated, and all the contracts and expenses to date total just over $2 million. And then at the bottom, you can see the remaining design phase tasks are construction documents, bidding services, and then anticipated additional permitting and OPM budget and some contingency to get us through bidding to have a winning, construction bid in hand. And so ultimately, this $1.2 million ask would, combined with the $490,000 that remains from previous appropriations, would fund the rest of the construction documents and bidding phase of the project. We are advancing the design pretty expeditiously. I think it's kind of nice to come back a year later with the same $1.2 million ask. We have spent a lot of time working with the Nantucket Hunting Association and working on permitting, but I think we've been really efficient with our spending and time spent on the project to date. And so we have submitted our updated renderings to the Historic District Commission for a certificate of appropriateness. We also had a preliminary review by HDC members in August. And so we are also hosting a public meeting on March 6th, which is required by MIPA. And that's in conjunction with the Nantucket Hunting Association shooting range that's proposed adjacent to the new DBW at 1 Shadbush. And we do have a really nice project webpage if anyone hasn't seen it. If you haven't, I suggest you go check it out. There's a lot of really good information that goes back, to previous design efforts and what we're doing, and also probably more importantly, what's the benefit of the new facility and what are we proposing. So that's kind of all I have to speak on. But if you guys have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Drew. And Joe Wright had shared the link with me, and I shared it with FinCom today of your website page. So,
Oh, great.
Peter, you have a question?
Yeah, Drew, do you know what the original total cost was in 2015 and what your estimated total cost is now?
So interestingly enough, Stephen, if you want to scroll up, the original appropriation in 2015 was a renovation and design of a new garage at the DPW at 188 Mattakit. And I think, again, that was 8 years before I started at the DPW. But I think it was at that time that they realized, when they did a condition assessment and a feasibility study of this site, they realized there's really no room for growth here. And that's why the second contract for Weston and Sampson, the design services and site alternatives, kind of was born out of that. So there was no cost estimate done back then. It was really, we need more space. We need a new garage. I think they realized, well, there's no way to do that here. And so then you can see after Article 16 and the 2018 ATM was appropriated, the town brought on Vertex as an owner's project manager, and Avalon Consulting Group has had 2 different contracts for the habitat and rare species mapping, and then subsequently the permitting through MIPA and Natural Heritage. Last year, Weston and Sampson completed their schematic design of the new DBW facility, which included an independent cost estimate. And that included the building itself, all of the site improvements, shared elements, like a septic system, for example, that would be shared with the Nantucket Hunting Association, and roadway improvements and utility extensions to the site. That raw cost estimate was $67 million. And that was based on if we were to bid the project essentially right now, like this spring. So obviously we're at a point where we're looking for a supplemental design funding at Springtown meeting and hopefully construction funding in the fall. So, that 67 million doesn't include some soft costs, OPM and other engineering services through construction. Obviously we'd have plenty of staff working on overseeing the construction to make sure that, the product is exactly what we expect it to be. For Capital Program Committee, I had put in $80 million as an all-in number. I think that's high, but there's also recently been a 25% tariff on steel. You know, there's outside economic factors that obviously we don't control. And so hopefully it is not much more than $67 million, but that is the most recent cost estimate we have. As part of the design development process or project or contract that we're in now, there will be another independent cost estimate, and obviously the facility will have slightly changed in design from schematic design through design development. And then before we go out to bid, both the design engineer and the LPM will do independent cost estimates and then reconcile those. So we hope that between today and actually putting the project out to bid, we have even more refined and confident numbers in the cost estimate. But of course, you put something out to bid, there's really no guarantee as to what will come back.
What's the total square footage?
65,000 square feet. Half of that, essentially half of that is a vehicle and equipment indoor storage facility. So the workshops are slightly larger than we currently have, but that's, you know, very much needed. Same thing with the office space and employee facilities and our central fleet garage. But the overwhelming majority of that square footage is getting all our vehicles and equipment indoors.
Plus the location is gonna be so much more convenient than Mattocket Road, or?
Right. Yeah, the central location is certainly ideal. You know, it's also a neighborhood that we really fit in. We work closely with National Grid, other contractors in that area. And yeah, being on the trucking route and centrally located is massive compared to where we are here. You know, our response time during snow and ice events to Sconset and, you know, the outer reaches on Pulpus is certainly less than ideal.
Thank you, Drew. Jill, you had a question?
Yeah, just could you, I don't think I heard you right, Drew, about the square footage. So 33,000 square feet for the storage. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the garage. And then you're saying you're saying about 33,000 for staff?
So it's a 65,000 square foot building
Yep.
that's currently proposed. About 30,000 square feet is indoor vehicle and equipment storage. So a big garage with parking spaces. It does have a mezzanine above for seasonal equipment and materials, snow and ice, you know, salt spreaders, things like that. Employee facilities, a muster room where we can actually do proper training for our staff, where we can host public meetings, where we can, you know, kind of rally the troops when we're in a snow and ice or storm kind of emergency event. That's something we don't have now. You know, we don't have a conference room here right now. We call it a conference room, but has a kitchenette in it. There's no door on it, you know, so there are some things in the new facility that we don't currently have. Other than that, our operations, our Parks and Rec and tree workshop, the lines and sign shop, which is currently at 2 Fairgrounds Road, and our facilities workshop, and our central fleet garage are all currently very much undersized. And so, yeah, essentially half the building is that vehicle and equipment storage, and the other 30,000 square feet or so is a combination of central fleet individual workshops for our 5 different divisions of the DPW, employee facilities, and office administration area.
Thank you.
Curtis?
Yes, Curtis Barnes. I just wonder, is there any consideration for employee housing in the complex that would be helpful, seasonal or year round?
We are not proposing to have employee housing constructed as part of this project. It is something we looked into. We are unfortunately kind of constrained, even though it's a 27-acre site, it is mapped priority habitat for an endangered moth species. So we can only develop 1/3 of the site, and the other 2/3 has to go into conservation restriction. That's a natural heritage requirement. You know, I think the most important thing for us as far as this facility is to plan not just for what we need now, but to plan for the future, because this is a facility that's going to last for, you know, 50, 60, 70 years. But more importantly, you know, to Denise's point, in terms of the central location, this will be the forever home of the DPW. And it needs to be something that functions efficiently every day and the community can rely on. And so we looked into employee housing, but it didn't seem to really fit on the site. And again, there's 1.1 acres next door that's going to be utilized by the Nantucket Hunting Association for a shooting range, which is a great community benefit. If that wasn't being constructed, I'm sure the housing office would gladly look at developing housing on that 1.1 acres. But we're not planning to do employee housing for DPW employees at this site. I would also add that it's not on sewer. It's a dead end road. It's in the industrial park. We talked about it with the, town administration, select board, others. We need housing. I'm not sold that that's the absolute best place for employee housing. And, as Rick presented earlier, there are a lot of town employee housing, projects and initiatives. And so we didn't feel like it was really necessary to jam housing into this project at this time.
Thank you, Drew. Jeremy?
Yeah, Drew, I was just curious. It seems like this is gonna cost over $1,000 a square foot. And I wondered, how does that compare from what you've looked at sort of to other projects around the country? So we can get an understanding of the premium required for Nantucket.
Interestingly enough, I asked our design engineer and architects early on, what are you seeing elsewhere off island? They've worked on facilities in Yarmouth, Easton, Mass, a whole bunch of projects over the years, obviously. And he was saying, you know what, you're probably looking at $900 a square foot. And it was very preliminary. We were looking at every position, literally every person that works at the DPW, what space do they need? What divisions, facilities, operations, central fleet, what do they need to do their job effectively and efficiently? And we came up with a rough number of 60,000 square feet, and we're not much higher than that now. And when, he had said that kind of back of the envelope, like, you're probably looking at $900 a square foot, it kind of still rings true. It's certainly not a small project. I'm sure some very big reputable contractors will be looking at it aggressively and hopefully, putting a price in that they developed with a fairly sharp pencil. And so sure, there's a Nantucket premium, but I'm confident in saying that it's not twice the price it would be if it was elsewhere. But sure, it's no cheaper doing construction on Nantucket than, in Easton or, Bridgewater or somewhere like that.
No, but that's helpful information. If on the mainland, it's 900 a foot and we're maybe 12% more expensive over here, we hope. That's relevant information.
Absolutely.
It's way more than a 10 or 12% premium to build here. It's more like a 30% or 40% premium. So I don't know where they got that number from, but.
Well, I would say, sorry, I might have misspoke. So I think off-island facilities are probably in the range of $750 a square foot. What I'm saying is that when we did an initial back of the envelope quick calculation, kind of, order of magnitude, calculation, it was if it's 700 a square foot off island, he thought we would be looking at 900 or 950. So there's your 25-30%.
Right. Okay, that works.
I think that makes more sense. Sure, we might be looking at closer to 1,000 a square foot, but that schematic design cost estimate was early on in the process. And so we'll see. We're going to do 3 more cost estimates between now and the day we put it out to bid. And obviously we'll have better numbers by that point.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Drew. Any other questions or comments? Okay, may I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Okay, thank you, Peter. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jill. All right, Jill. Thank you. Chris.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Joanna.
Aye.
Jeremy.
Aye.
Joe. Rob.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Denise, aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you.
Okay, our island home.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the town manager is going to take us a brief intro, and then I think we're going to respond to some of Joe's questions. We have a pro forma that we'll put up, and then I think the plan is to just try to respond to the committee's questions.
Okay, sounds good. Libby?
Okay, so this is a very, very large project, as you know, so I want to take just a little bit of time to re-review with you a recent history of the project. It did not just come out of the blue. It's been worked on for all told, probably over 20 years. And since 2017, I'm just going to go back to that. At the 2017 annual town meeting, the town proposed the acquisition of property adjacent to Sherburne Commons, plus an appropriation for a skilled nursing facility that would be constructed on the property to be acquired. Those articles were not approved by voters. In 2018, the select board directed town administration to determine what it would take to construct a new Our Island Home facility at the current site on East Creek Road. Thereafter, between 2019 and 2021, architects were engaged to undertake the analysis. Charrettes were held, stakeholders were interviewed, other properties close to the current site were reviewed and re-reviewed. Consultation with the State Department of Public Health occurred, and analysis of different operating models was conducted. At its meeting on August 18th, 2021, the select board voted to pursue a new facility at the Sherburne Commons site with the current Our Island Home to be repurposed for a senior center, and to put forward an article at the 2022 annual town meeting for design for a new Our Island Home facility. We engaged Brenda Johnson to help us assist with public outreach and to gather and provide feedback and input for a new facility. At the 2022 annual town meeting and annual town election, there was a debt exclusion ballot question. Design and associated funds in the amount of $8.5 million was approved. In 2023, the design architect and OPM, owner's project manager, were engaged, and the board approved the construction manager at risk, CMR, project delivery method. That approach also requires the approval of the State Inspector General, which was granted in early 2024, just about a year ago. Using the CMR process increased the accuracy of cost estimates because the contracted builder is involved in the budgeting phases along with the design team, and therefore it provides a higher level of cost control. And we did a presentation to the board on this, along with several other presentations about the Island Home over the last few years. They're all on the town website. Additionally, the construction manager is contracted to deliver the project at a guaranteed maximum price based on an agreed set of construction documents and specs. In addition, in accordance with statutory requirements, the contractor, Consigli Construction Company, was selected. There is a long-term lease between the town and Sherburne for the Sherburne facility on town property. The lease is subject to an amendment and is the subject of current negotiations with the Sherburne Commons Board of Directors, and that is an active situation. We also, at the request of the Select Board, provided the board with a 5-year operating projection overview at a board meeting in December, and that information is also online. I know there may be some questions about that, and I think we're as prepared as we can be to answer them. Some of the project team is online here. We have Craig Piper of SMRT, the architect. We have John Lemieux, who is John still on? Yes, sorry, John.
Yes, I'm here.
John is our, thank you, he's our OPM. And myself, Rick, Peter Schaefer, and Don Holgate from the select board are all on a steering committee. And hopefully we are prepared to answer any questions. We know this is a very huge project. We do have a number of public outreach activities underway. And ready to answer questions.
Thank you, Libby. Brian, do you want to go over to you next, and then
Yeah,
we'll
sure.
go to questions?
So I know, Madam Chair, that you had sent around Joe's questions, and we had kind of had a little bit of a meeting, and there was some questions, observations after the presentation of the pro forma. What you have here is based on that discussion. We attempted to make this a little easier based on our discussion with Joe. We made no changes from what was in the pro forma other than just repositioning how this looked and some minor changes. So we've made no changes to revenue and expenses. We've relied on discussions and the expertise from Bob Eisenstein and Peter Holden for their expertise in managing operating skilled nursing facilities. But I think, Joe, one of your concerns was just kind of showing what the revenues versus expenditures were versus what the amount from the general fund was. So what we've done is we've cleaned this up by putting the actual revenue from patients that we've estimated or forecast for the 5 years from 26 to 30, the expenses that we forecast straight out of the pro formas, what that would look like on a business model for net earnings. We've included for this discussion any short-term interest and other financing costs for the project. We've assumed 112 million in the article. It's $105 million is the request, and that delta is the remaining amount of the $8.5 million that would be borrowed. So that's the 112 million that's in this calculation. And then it shows, which does tie fairly close to Joe's observation, what the actual amount from the general fund is over these 5 years. We have not tried to carry this all the way out over 25 years because I don't think I could get any reasonable, accurate number for 25 years of operating expense in the nursing home business. So we have the 5 years. I will tell the committee that the debt service for the 25 years that we have estimated for the 112 million would be 170 million, just over 170 million for principal and interest for the debt service on this project. Okay. It would stay roughly consistent at about $8.5 million a year for the full length of that $25 million for that 25-year borrowing. Joe, I think this kind of displays or answers what we discussed, I believe. Is that correct?
You're muted,
I think
Joe.
you're muted.
Joe, you're muted.
In simple terms, I think what I saw was that this would take a loss that is roughly $5.5 million of cash a year today. And it would increase it to roughly $14.5 million a year. And then each year you'd have to borrow the $14.5 million worth of cash because it doesn't just appear. So we're locking in basically a $14.5 million negative cash flow for 25 years. I just question whether or not that is a smart thing for Nantucket to do. We're the only county in Massachusetts that has a retirement home.
Nursing home.
We're the maximum number of clients we can have is 45. The pro forma that I saw stated, and I think it's fair, that no category of client covers the fixed cost today. My guess is that under Mr. Trump, the willingness of the government to subsidize things like this is not going to improve, not immediately. So to me, the question is whether or not $14.5 million a year for 35 to 45 people is a smart thing for Nantucket to do. That's the question. And my sense, I would likely vote against it.
Thank you, Joe. Other questions?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, of course.
I
you
have
can,
one.
Peter. Wait,
Okay.
Jeremy, Peter's next.
Joe, I think one thing that you have to take into consideration is this was never a money-making project. We never thought we were gonna make money on it. We always knew we were gonna lose money on it. As a matter of fact, when we had the original vote for the $8.5 million, I voted against it. Now, as I've learned much more, that the people who work there, the people who stay there, I've changed my mind. I think this is a moral decision. Financially, it doesn't work. I agree 100%. But it's a moral decision. Do we want to say to our elderly who are ill and need to have nursing care that, when that time comes, goodbye, go find some place on the mainland because there's really nothing available on the Cape. The Cape is full. So you'd be, 2 hours away by the time somebody got to visit you. So, that was really what brought this to my, where I looked at it and I said, wow, this is something that makes sense. It is your final home on Nantucket, no question about it. But I think that when you look at it strictly financially, and I agree with you 100%, it doesn't work. I agree. It's a matter of we want to make a commitment by the town of Nantucket and the people in Nantucket to support this nursing home on a moral basis.
No, in the final analysis, if the residents of the town want to spend $14.5 million, that's fine. I'm not good at, well, I go to church, I'm good at that kind of stuff, but morally, to me, this is a very expensive operation. And in a perfect world, you would do everything for everybody, but the world isn't imperfect, and you can't. And the question is whether or not you can afford it. We've got $14.5 million negative for this. We've got a $60 million DPW facility, which is going to have some economic benefits. This has no economic benefits. It locks us into a bad business for 25 years. If we build this facility, we're going to be in this business for the rest of time. And I agree that's a nice thing. It's a morally wonderful thing to do. But whether or not it's a smart thing to do financially, that's my question. And I'm a financial guy, and I look at things like this from the perspective of the finance committee as to whether or not it's a good economic decision.
Thank
And
you,
I
Joe.
agree
Jeremy?
that $5 million is okay, but at 14.5, I have a problem.
So
Thank you,
Denise,
Joe. Go ahead.
a question for Brian. Brian, this will be approximately 10% of the town's operating budget, and which suggests that taxes have to go up about 10% just to pay for this one thing for 40 odd people. And I know that town residents at a certain level have a reduction in their taxes. And there are some people who think, well, the other guys will just pay for everything. I wondered if, as I sent you a note the other day, if you were able to calculate the percentage of different people's taxes, how they would rise.
So I haven't calculated every single person. The tax rate calculator actually will do that for everybody that we have done, which is why we put that together, but it would, so we have calculated it for the average year-round residential property assessed at $2,012,976 that has the residential exemption, Jeremy, which would be taxed at an assessed value of $1,185,000. $7, which would be a projected impact, and I want everybody to be clear, this is based on the assessed valuations today and the levy capacity, the levy limit as approved by the DOR for the fiscal 25 tax rate. This will certainly change as we move towards permanent borrowing, but that would be an increase of $271.07 in an individual's tax bill. The impact would be 22.2287 per thousand on an individual's tax bill.
Brian, that's what the current.
So
residential-
Brian, I think when people go around and they bandy around the number that, oh, the average guy on island is only going to get $200 odd, that is, people are hiding the truth, because if the tax bill has to go up globally 10% to pay for this, and somebody's taxes, one group's are only going to go up $200. I have a sense that that there are many people whose taxes are going to go up 15% just for this project. And I haven't run the precise numbers, but I think
Well,
that.
sure. I mean, if you take as an example, the average residential value all in, regardless of year round or not, which is $3,196,000, just doing 0.2287 per thousand, that's about a $700 increase on the tax bill, which I think we have disclosed as well. Which the other point to make is, which is why we have put the tax rate impact calculator out there so that every person can go, if they would like to, and see what it would do to for their particular property, including whether they have the residential exemption or not, for this very purpose, because it realistically is impossible for me to attempt to calculate the impact to every single homeowner. But you're right, everybody is
Absolutely.
going to be impacted at a different percentage across the island, and I don't think that anybody involved in this discounts that fact in any way. Or doesn't recognize.
And
it.
so while there will be great differences in the aggregate, tax rates generally will have to go up about 10% to pay for this one project. As Joe has said, it's a $14 to $15 million before inflation cash deficit every single year.
Well, I think that I would caution you on immediately, we're putting two pieces of this into one increase, okay? Because if we think about it, the override that the taxpayers very graciously approved a few years ago for this project is already baked in, is already calculated into the levy limit. So in some respects, that's already calculated into the tax rate. So the only piece of that would be being built into any future increases would be the delta on a year-over-year basis for what we would be increasing the override, the additional transfer on a year-over-year basis at this point. The only real significant impact is really the cost of the debt service at this point, because the override was immediately calculated into the levy capacity and into the tax rate on a year-over-year basis already. So you're really talking about the delta every year for the increase in the levy capacity for us to raise and transfer to OIH, because some of it's already impacted and felt already in the tax rate every year.
Chris?
Thank you. Two reactions in a statement, I guess. One is a question to Joe, I guess through you, which is, have you done a similar analysis on the override for affordable housing and the capital we put into affordable housing and the number of individuals you think that will impact over the next 10 years versus the financials around this?
Joe, that's a question for you from Chris.
You get homework.
That'd be a tough one too.
Joe,
Did you hear me, Joe?
did you hear
Oh,
Chris's
I'm
question?
sorry. I didn't hear you.
Chris
My
asked-
question
Can you hear me
Brian,
now?
was the way the pro forma was written.
No, I know
Joe,
what the pro forma is.
wait,
Can you hear me now?
Joe.
I'm asking you a question, Joe.
You're asking me a question?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Have you done a similar analysis of the financials around the override for affordable housing and the
No.
capital into affordable
I
housing?
don't have I don't have, I'm not smart enough, number one. Number two, I don't have the information. I did an analysis of the pro forma that was in December 18 select board meeting. That's all I did.
I mean, would you speculate that more people will be impacted by the $5 million override for affordable housing over the next 10 years than will be affected by the $5 million override for the Island Home over the next 10 years?
This is not an area where I have expertise. My
Okay. I just want to point out that I think we fund things that help a small number of people, and there's a precedence for us doing that. So I think if you were to compare this to there, you'd find the numbers very similar. And then for the next one, the question around the tax increase, does anyone know the relative property taxes on a $9.5 million property on Nantucket versus a $9.5 million property in Palm Beach?
We have
Yeah,
the second lowest tax rate on the East Coast, based on my understanding.
It's a little bit less than a third, right? So a 10% increase in the taxes of those with the highest valued properties doesn't actually sound as shocking when you compare it to the 300% difference in similar markets.
Okay, Libby, you had your hand up. I'm sorry, Chris, were you done?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to make, those are just reactions to what I heard, and then I had something I
Okay,
wanted to say.
I'll have Libby go and then I'll come back to you. Okay, perfect. Libby, go ahead.
I apologize. I was raising my hand for Dawn because she is not able to raise her electronic hand.
Okay, Dawn?
Sorry, I don't know why the technology is not working, but I've had my hand up for a while. I mean, this has been my project since 2015, and there is a fundamental choice here. And there is a reason why the Capcom didn't support it with their lens of strictly financials. But we moved forward with doing this whole design and negotiating the whole deal with Sherburne Commons and figuring out every aspect of this for many years now. I mean, we're in year 10 since I came onto the board. I mean, the real choice is, do we want to be a Nantucket that takes care of this segment of the population? Because we really are going to have to send people elsewhere, probably far away. And yes, there are 45 beds at any one time. Those 45 beds turn over. They can be short-term rehab. They can be one of us younger people can go get knee surgery and need to spend a few nights there. But we moved forward with it because we did get the $5 million override passed. And that was an indication from the community that they wanted to take care of their own and they wanted to continue in this business. Yes, the price tag is higher than anything we've ever seen. It's not going to end because every building from here on out is probably going to be more than this. I mean, we're seeing the DPW facility that has sort of, I would say, way less technology in it coming in at not too far off from this price. So it's whether we stay in this business or not. It's not a great business model. It's a government subsidy. And that's the choice. And I hope the finance committee will consider supporting it because Nantucket has already indicated that they support it by doing the $5 million override. And if it gets to town meeting and the price tag is just too high, then we won't continue and we'll work towards closure. But the reality of the situation is, like, put yourselves in the position that it's one of your loved ones or yourself in the future. And it's not just impacting that one person who's in the bed, it's impacting every person who touches that person. Last time I went into the Island home, I saw Miss Ellie, who has filled my prescriptions at Nantucket Pharmacy for my whole life. And she recognized me and we chatted and it was amazing. And if she was in Western Mass somewhere, I'd never see her again. So I just want to appeal to you on that note. And also on the fact that we have done so much work on this. This is the best proposal that we could do to stay in this business and have a very functional, very long-standing, very efficient facility. And we can actually add 12 beds to this if we need to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm going to go back to Chris and then I'm going to go to Joanna and then Joe.
Yeah, I mean, Dawn actually covered a lot of what I was gonna say. Look, the $100 million number is shocking. I think one of the challenges this project is running up against is the 100 million is the new 40 million. And we just haven't seen that again and again, but we're about to, right? So that number is not gonna sound nearly as shocking 2 years from now as it sounds now. If you start from the position that we're gonna take care of this segment of our community, then this is the right project. The appropriate diligence has been done. $100 million number is a big number, but that is what it costs to build a facility like this. The other options that have been brought up, send people off island. Dawn spoke to it well. It was brought up at the capital program. I mean, I was confused, those two acronyms. Someone said, look, I lived outside of Boston. My loved one lived an hour away. It was workable. We're only an hour away from the mainland. Well, I defy you to get from your home here down to the High Line in time, then get on the boat, get to the other side, arrange ground transportation in less than 2.5 hours. And if you have a job, you can't just hop in your car after work at 5 o'clock, drive for an hour, see your loved one, drive in. You're there for the nighttime. So and that's getting into the weeds a little bit, but it's real. The isolation and the seclusion of Nantucket creates, even when in the age of high-speed ferries, creates a very different level of seclusion and the need to take care of each other in ways that you wouldn't do in a commercial environment or in other environments.
Thank you, Chris. Joanna?
Okay, I've got a couple questions. So let's go to the other side of this for a second. If we vote no on this, how long is left in the current situation, right? Like, what's the timeline for ramping this down and wrapping this up? Like, how long does that take? And are there interim steps, and how much money do those interim steps, like, what's the cost involved with that?
I would say it take a couple of years, a few years, because you just can't, DPH will step right
There
in.
is no
That's a-
plan B.
Joe, Peter's speaking, so you have to wait, please. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay.
Thank you.
When you close it down the facility, it's not, first of all, DPH will be stepping in, they'll dictate how we, close down the facility. You can't just automatically close down the facility. You have to find other, facilities that will receive them, and if they're appropriate. And then our situation, our population is quite different, that we have a lot of memory care, a lot of dementia that intermingle with our present regular population. So I would say it would take a couple of years. It's not like we will slowly phase out. It's not like a 1-year process. It would have to be done systematically and methodically. Okay, so it's not like a quick shutdown. Okay, and when you guys say it's only 40 beds or 45 beds. And like Dawn said, look at the people attached to that one person in that facility. You got the daughter, the sons, the wife or the husband, the brothers, the uncles. It's an extended family on this island to each one of those one people in that island. Also, yes, like financially, it is a tough business. It's always been a tough business. But here in Nantucket, we take care of our own. I'm not from Nantucket. I live on the mainland. And I can just say that you guys take care of your own, and you guys don't realize it, you don't need it. You don't even know we're there until you realize you need it. And a lot of people speaking, and a lot of people speaking, negatively and positively. We're available for your services too, if you need it. Okay? Thank you.
I'm not saying, I'm not speaking one way or another. I'm just trying to understand, like, what is the, if the voters vote no, what is the process for closing down our island home? How long does it take, and what does it cost us? Right? Like, I want to understand, like, the cost associated with that. Do we bear responsibility for helping to relocate these people? Right?
Yeah.
I understand the arguments on both sides. I just want to fully understand if this doesn't get voted, what does it cost us? I understand what it costs us as a community, but timeline, other costs that we haven't considered. That's really my
Let me go
question.
to Libby. Joanna, let me go to Libby for that.
All right, and then I have a second question.
Okay.
Thank you, Denise. So as Peter said, there's a process with the Department of Public Health to relocate people. How much does that cost? I don't think we have a good handle on that right now. And I'm not sure how we're going to get a good handle on that. It was something that we're going to have to pursue. And we're not talking about the day after the vote, if it's a negative, we're going to start shutting down. We're going to have to probably come to grips with the DPH to determine how much longer do they think we have. The facility is not in compliance with today's Department of Public Health regulations, and they've been very lenient with Nantucket because they understand our situation. But there's going to come a point where we can't comply we can't make rooms bigger. We can't make bathrooms bigger. There's no way to create more space in the existing facility. Are there things we could potentially do to fix the place up? Of course. And we've already done some of those things, but I don't know why we would invest too much more in the existing facility to keep it going for probably not that long of a time. We don't know the years, but we would have to, and the Department of Public Health, by the way, is not going to say to us, you have X years.
Right.
They're not going to say that. We're going to have to like somehow negotiate something with them at some point when they arrive one day and say, okay, this is not going to work anymore. Your facility is not suitable for these people.
Okay.
Thank you. Joanna, your next question?
Yeah, the next question is, I want to understand our capability of executing this project and managing this project, right? This would be the most ambitious project that we've taken on. And this is not small either financially or from a labor perspective or from a management expertise perspective for the town of Nantucket to take on building this type of residential facility seems like a stretch. And I want to understand like the plan for the kind of expertise you might want to hire, right? The timeline for that. And then, I mean, we all know this because we've been doing this for a long time, like the cost overruns, because, okay, let's just paint the picture. We vote yes on it, right? What are the incremental steps to get this to happen in a time frame where we don't run into large cost overruns and the project is well managed and executed? Like, what are the steps that you've identified and how quickly can they be implemented?
Libby, I'm gonna go back to you on that.
Thank you. That's exactly why we are required to hire an owner's project manager for a project of this magnitude. And I would look to John to explain the issue of cost overruns and management. This is all contained within the contractual obligations of the contractor and the OPM for that matter. John, if it's okay, Denise, if John could elaborate a little bit.
Yep, please go ahead, John.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. So it's a great question, right? I think the most important piece of the equation is that this project is out to bid right now. So while we are talking about estimated dollars right now, we will have a hard price from the designer, excuse me, from the contractor, Consigli, that Libby referenced previously, that will be their contract amount. So unlike when you do a school project with the state or, you know, with another funding entity, you have to agree to a budget beforehand. We're actually coming to you with that construction final number, you know, that will be part of the equation that's in the final number that will be presented in a few weeks. The project is out to bid right now. Once we have those bids in from the subcontractors, Consigli will present us their guaranteed maximum price proposal. We'll go through it. We'll look at their terms, their assumptions and contingencies, measure all of those, put all of that into a total project budget form that we've already been working on in concert with SMRT, the architect. And that is a budget that includes everything, not just the hard construction costs, the soft costs also for your architect, for your OPM, your furniture, fixtures, and equipment, your medical equipment, and again, the contingency bucket for the just in case for what happens after the fact. So, you know, to be clear, you know, with an approved vote, you know, the design for this project is essentially just about complete, right? So we're ready to go. And the thought would be with an approved town meeting vote, with an approved ballot, we would then be moving ahead right into the early phases of, you know, sign an agreement with Consigli for the GMP, move right into the procurement phase. You know, the shovels don't go in the ground on day one. You know, obviously this is a phased project. The project has to, you know, construct housing, move housing, prep the land, start the building, right? So all of those steps have been taken into account in the process. And that's, again, one of the big benefits of having Consigli having been at the table with us for many months now. They've been able to see this, you know, see the project, see its final design, and really collaborate with the town for what, you know, for the steps that are coming. So, you know, and as far as cost control goes, you know, there will be some things that we won't be buying for a bit. So we're going to have to, you know, keep an eye on things like, you know, all of the equipment, all the furniture. You know, we are wary of you know, tariffs and what they can do. You know, obviously we know there's a tariff on steel and aluminum right now. Steel is what would be the frame of the building. Aluminum, a lot of furniture is made from aluminum, you know, office furniture, some medical equipment. So again, we'll be watching that along the way, but we wouldn't be buying any of those things. But we will be buying the biggest nut of the project, you know, which is that construction contract, and that's locked in. And if there are cost increases, that's not on us, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the contractor, I should say the CM, is providing us with a guaranteed maximum price that does include some contingencies. It includes some allowances. But the good news is that all of those contingencies and allowances, if unspent through the process, it's Nantucket's money. It comes back to you. It's not this is not like a private project with the CM where there are cost sharing initiatives where if you save $1, they get 50 cents and we get 50 cents. No, the dollar is Nantucket's, and it will be administered, through the process with us as the OPM, with SMRT as as a designer, in concert with the rest of the steering committee that's been working, with the group, for, many, many months now.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Anything else, Joanna?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Joe? And then
Um,
Jeremy.
You said Joe?
Yes, I said Joe.
The way I come at this is I'm not, I'm on a finance committee. I'm not on a moral committee. Morally, I know I've been coming to Nantucket since 1948. I can remember seeing our island home when I was a 5 or 6 year old child, and I knew what it was, and I knew that it was important. I understand that. But when I read the select board pro forma, was a picture that said that this is a $5 million decision. It's not a $5 million decision. It's a $14.5 million decision. And it's a $14.5 million decision every year for the next 25 years-ish. And that is based on a fairly optimistic assumption that more residents will produce better economics. And the pro forma says that that's not an expectation. So I think that the pro forma that Brian showed is close to the truth. And I think one of the jobs of the finance committee is to make sure that what's out there in the public represents the best picture as we know it. And the picture that was out there didn't do that. And there have been articles in the Globe saying it's a $5 million a year. It's not a $5 million a year. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
I'm not, the voters will decide, but the voters deserve to know what they're deciding.
Thank you, Joe. Jeremy?
A question for Brian and Libby, because it just occurred to me there are two components missing here, and Joanna addressed one, but the avoided closure cost and the value of the facility that is being left for other purposes. Those two things should really be deducts in our analysis against $100 million. So if the avoided closure cost by having a new facility is substantial, it should go into the equation. And if we have any sense of how our Island Homes existing facility is going to be repurposed, sold or otherwise, that too should be a deduct from the value that, or from the cost of what we're looking at. And so I was wondering, Brian, possibly, do we have a sense of those two numbers?
Libby's got her hand raised. Do you want to go to
I'm
Libby
gonna,
first?
I don't want to really throw this one to Libby, but I'm going to.
Libby, you go, and then Rick after you, or after Libby, please.
Those are really excellent points that Jeremy is making. The closure costs, I think we need to look a little bit more at, because we don't really know what they are specific to the relocation of people who may have to go somewhere else. We also don't know the collective bargaining implications. So those need to be looked at, but I would bet that in comparison to the overall cost of the project, and sidebar on the overall cost of the project, as Dawn mentioned, there are other expenses unrelated to the construction that are in the appropriation. So the building the facility isn't $90 whatever $100 million. In any event, that's the closure cost. Now, the value of the existing facility, first, I want to say there is no intent whatsoever to sell that property. I cannot overemphasize that. That floats around out there in the public from time to time, and the select board have been adamant that that property will not be sold. It will be repurposed for the senior center. So I am a little hesitant to say, I like where you're going with deducting those costs from the overall project cost, but there is going to be a cost to build a new senior center.
True, but I guess my point is, even if avoided closure costs were 5 million bucks or $10 million. You know, I can't imagine there'd be more than that, but there is some amount that you will avoid a liability by doing this project. And that has a number, and it'll have a over under, but there is a number. And then the very fact that you may repurpose the existing facility for something else like the senior center, that has economic value as well. And we can look at, I believe that this project should be looked at holistically of everything that touches it, because all of these factors actually go into it. And it all of a sudden struck me that we were just looking at this thing in a vacuum as opposed to everything. And so I have a sense that those two numbers, you know, they're not going to cut the value of the project in half, but you know, maybe they knock 20% off or 25% off. I don't know.
Rick?
I just wanted to comment on one of Joe's comments that the pro forma suggested it was a $5 million a year loser. It does not. The final page shows the net earnings with the debt cost of a loss of $8 million a year. And we've explained that the subsidy, the override, is treated as revenues under Massachusetts general law. So we presented it in a way that was proper to present. And I think we pretty much made the point that this is a losing operation. I just don't think it's correct to say that we presented it as a $5 million a year loser. And then just on the closure cost, I think, you know, a pretty simple way to X relocation of residents would simply be to say, you're going to lose, straight line your decline in population. That's $5 million a year of revenue. So you cut that to $2.5 million for each year. So that's $5 million of revenue over 2 years. And it costs you $10 million a year to run it. So that's $20 million. So it's going to be a minimum of 15 to close it.
And so then, Rick, that's a good way to look at it. And so if your avoided closure costs are actually $15 million, that's a significant part of the analysis that should be, I believe, that should be shown relative to the cost of this project. And then
that's under the assumption that we just don't say it's closing a year from now. Folks, you need to find another alternative. I know that sounds harsh, but if you were in any other business and that business told you it was closing, it would close. I don't necessarily believe it's up to the town of Nantucket to have to relocate those people or to keep that in. I mean, I realize how popular I am going to be saying this, but at the same time, you know, if Nantucket Cottage Hospital closed tomorrow, there's no responsibility from them. And Chris may be correcting me, but at the end of the day, if the business closes, if a business is closing with sufficient notice, it's up to the people who are the customers of that business, the clients of that business, to find an alternative, not the town. So, Rick, with due respect, I don't think we're going to be looking at $15 to $20 million to close it. I think it's probably a better number, but at the same time, we don't know that number, which is fair.
No, I agree, but I was just saying over 2 years, if you think that's a reasonable timeline, then that's roughly what it's going to cost you.
And I also don't know that we're making a decision about a new Island home or it's closed tomorrow. I think the lifeline of it is probably longer than a couple of years. So are we building a new one versus are we closing our island home? And I don't see that we're closing our island home. I see that we're deciding whether we're building a new one. And then therefore, as a community, if we wanted to invest to keep the current one going for the next 20 years, we can make that decision. Jill?
If I could follow what Denise says, I think one of the main things that's going to come out of town meeting that you all need to think about with Dawn and Libby and Brian is people are going to ask, if we don't vote for this, when are you going to close it? And I know that you can't answer that question, but I personally think you're going to need to answer that question because it will greatly influence what they do.
The answer is when the state closes us down.
Yeah, but the state keeps giving us permission to stay open for many, many years now, so they might do that indefinitely.
No, they won't do it indefinitely because we're maxed out. We're maxed out in all areas like IT, room sizes. They've been very gracious to us over the years. They realized every time we have an annual survey to come in, what's the plan? They were thrilled. The survey team, DPH was thrilled when they saw the plans on the walls, all that. And they know that we're short. They know the bathroom is too small and we can no longer do 4. Now we can't do 3. Now it's down to 2. Now we're going to 1.
Yeah.
So all these new regs are coming in and they're being gracious to us. They're not gonna keep us open. They're gonna say, listen, you know. you've
Well,
been
that's a
great."
really good case for you to make at a town meeting. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I appreciate that.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you
Like,
There's so
if
many-
people
Yeah,
feel like they have a
yeah.
bullet to their head, they're not gonna pull the trigger. So I'm serious.
And I know you're serious, and I appreciate what the expertise you bring to the table. It's just that we have so many talking points that we don't hit. It's like, it takes a village, all of us here, to come up with these ideas. There's a lot of bright people here. And everybody's bringing up a good point. You know, but I don't think we have to be cohesive together to present what you're seeing. All of you here, you guys present great points, and we have to get together on that. Thank you.
Peter?
Just 2 quick things. Number 1 is, we're also leaving out the fact that we have 59 employees in that building. And they make good salaries in that, doing in that work. So I mean, it's, I don't know where they would go. The other thing is that we don't count, because we don't know how it would work out. We built the hospital totally on donations in this town.
Chris could
Okay.
raise some money.
Yeah, we don't know, because we can't go out and ask for donations at this point. We don't know what, you know, what would be available in donations. You know, maybe it could be 10 million, maybe it could be 20 million, who knows? But that's another potential way to lower the cost of the building.
Chris?
It is, I might say that if you were to increase the residential exemption and put the burden more on the seasonal homeowners, you're gonna get the money from the same people anyway. It's a heck of a lot easier to do that than go out and raise the money. But I would say, Madam Chair, not to disagree with you, but I think a
Yeah, you can.
community that has committed to a $5 million override is not gonna pull the rug out from under this community, supporting this community in no way into a year like a commercial venture might.
Okay,
So I do think it's appropriate that, because what you hear around the community, right, among some people is, for that amount of money, we could do this, or for that amount of money, we could do that, suggesting that at least some amount of money would be used in the alternative to help people defray whatever the alternative
Mhm.
is. So I don't,
yeah, I don't think
you've
there's,
charted out one, you know, maybe one boundary is 0, one boundary is 15, but I don't think
No.
it ends at either boundary.
I mean, I've always contended that Nantucket votes its values. I've said that since time began.
Hmm.
And I just, we'll have to see on this. We'll just have to see if this is, and I don't look at it as 45 beds ever. I've always looked at it as 45 beds times 20 people. So 900 people between employees, family, friends. There's at least 1,000 people that are affected by our island home. It's not just I've never looked at it as 45. And 1,000 out of a 20,000 population, you know, that's the question, that's the math that I do in my head. So on that, okay, any other, Rob?
Don has been trying to be recognized for quite a while again.
Okay, thanks. Dawn?
Sorry, I don't know why I can't raise a virtual hand for some reason, but just a few points. I think the facility has 5 years tops. They have been giving us passes because we're designing a new facility. And I don't think the select board has the appetite to do extensive renovations to keep a failing facility running if the community doesn't support staying in the business. So that's the real decision here. But to Jeremy's points, let's, throw some numbers at it. I haven't done a detailed analysis of what the property values are, but 2.5 acres with the views that place has, what's it worth on an open market? I mean, we are not going to sell it, but if we try to acquire it to do something else for the town, somewhere between 10 and $15 million. And then vacating the senior center site, there's another pretty darn valuable piece of real estate with water views. So throw those things into the equation, plus the employee housing that we're gaining with our deal with Sherburne Commons, that's part of this, out at the sewer. That's pretty valuable as well. I mean, if we were to recreate that, that's probably a $5 million expense. And it's costing us less than that to move those. Yes, we do have to build them new, but we're also helping Sherburne Commons stay in operation, which is funding, which is not funding, supporting another whole segment of our population. So there's a lot of wins here that play into it that are aside from the actual island home that I think people need to think about in terms of just the entire operation of Nantucket and being 30 miles out to sea and what we have to do as a community. And don't forget that over 80% are being paid by people who don't even vote.
Oh my gosh, my favorite. Joanna?
Yeah, I mean, I support what Dawn just said. I think that we need to look at this in a different way and assign values to all of those things and what I'm going to call the de-ascension cost of transitioning people out of this, which I agree. I don't think it's going to be like a year or two. I think it would potentially be a 5-year runway to have that happen because nobody's going to, these things don't move quickly.
Avoided closure cost.
Yes,
Jeremy,
avoided-
let Joanna talk, please.
Yeah, so I think that all those things kind of need to be thought through. So that we are, because I do think there are some offsets to the $100 million cost of the operation. So I think it's good that we had this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Jeremy, now, did you have something to say?
Oh, no, I just, again, trying to calculate avoided closure costs is a real thing, and that should go into the calculus.
Joe?
Last comment, I just think it's important that the voter knows what they're buying. And that it's a 15 or $14.5 million a year cash expenditure, likely for 20 or 25 years. And they should know that. They shouldn't be told it's a $5 million expenditure. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but Joe, to Rick's earlier points, let go of the 5 million because it's not what's being said. I anymore. Maybe it was said before, but right now it's quite clear that Brian put up a spreadsheet that said it's minus 14.5 in year 5. And, you know, the 5 million was always the override from years before. And so I think it's appropriate now that we all just move past the 5 onto the minus 14. And I think that will come out clearly in the discussions. Okay, anything else before I ask for a motion? Okay, nothing else? All right. May I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Made by Chris and seconded by Peter, motion to adopt. All right, any further discussion on the motion before I go to a roll call vote? Okay,
I have
yes, Jeremy.
I guess I have a comment more than anything else. I would suggest that if this is approved, when the town presents it, or the warrant article proponent presents it, that they do an explanation with greater analysis that takes into account much of what we have said tonight.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Oh, Steve raised his hand.
Stephen?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest actually that we are the people who ought to do that analysis in the form of a comment. We can try to encapsulate some of what was discussed here tonight.
That would work.
A good idea.
All right, thank you. Okay, the motion is motion to adopt. Chris?
Aye.
Jill?
No.
Aye.
Peter? Stephen?
Aye.
Okay. Joanna?
Aye.
Jeremy?
Aye.
Joe?
Nay.
Rob?
Aye.
And Denise is nay. Okay, that passed 6-3. And there'll be a comment written by Stephen. He volunteered when he suggested it. Thank you, Stephen.
Grouse out of retirement or something.
I'm going to. He's very, okay, all right. Thank you very much, everybody. Now we have, Tom Nevers bike path. And is it Charlie that's presenting that?
Mike Burns.
I think
Oh, Mike Burns is?
and I
Okay.
think Madam Chair, Mike Burns and Drew Patton are both on.
Oh, okay,
So-
thank you. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is, the request was put together based on, construction costs and, right-of-way, estimates. That was what generated the, $6.85 million request. When the request was put together in June of this past summer, we were working off a very preliminary plan that we didn't really have a lot of outreach on with the butters. Since we've submitted that, we've heard back from, a little less than half of those along the corridor. There are about 35 properties that would be impacted by this project. We heard from a little less than half of those. A majority asked that we greatly reduce or avoid property impacts altogether if they're going to support the project. So we provided that feedback back to our engineer. They've made some adjustments to the design alignments. We actually have a meeting with our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee later this month to review those options. Ultimately, we will bring a recommended alignment to the county commissioners for adoption. And long story short, that option will have greatly reduced the right-of-way impacts on this. That said, the budgeted amount there, the $6.85 million that we had asked for, I did mention that about 2 million of that was for right-of-way easements and acquisitions. Like I had mentioned, we did greatly reduce that. However, we've had some construction bids come in over the summer, and it's given a lot of us sticker shock and pause. Reviewing this 6.85 million with the DPW director recently, and combing through the estimates that have been developed recently, I think we would feel more comfortable adding an additional contingency percentage to that estimate of at least 15%, and perhaps rounding that figure up to $8 million. Again, because of the inflation for materials. There's a boardwalk element that's part of this that's will likely be more expensive than what we were estimating right now. So the ask would be to perhaps increase this dollar figure to round up to $8 million to hopefully provide a lot of coverage there and provide a ceiling. Yes, ma'am.
Mike, thank you. If I can just interrupt you for a second. So this number, the 6.8, et cetera, has gone through Capcom, but the 8 million, this is a new number just now?
We've had some recent construction projects bid and reviewed those costs for materials. So
yeah, I don't dispute that the numbers, the 8 million is probably the more accurate number. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear in my question, my mistake. So the capital committee did not see the $8 million number.
No, this is very recently that we've kind of reviewed our preliminary estimates for this project, compared them with recent bid estimates, and tried to come up with an approach that we would feel comfortable with. So no, that hasn't been reviewed with the Capcom, but sharing that with you all now.
So my proposal then, if the committee agrees, if the finance committee agrees, is that we push this back to capital committee, because they have a process that they go through, a very rigorous process, and then we talk about it again. We park this until we'll all be staying till midnight on March 10th, but that's a separate issue. I know you're all looking forward to that. So that would be my preference, is that capital committee gets to discuss it, Mike and Drew, before it comes to finance committee again. Is the committee okay with that?
Good idea.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Mike, can you then attend capital committee on Tuesday? What time is it, Jill?
We meet at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, but do you have the number by then, or you're just, it sounds like you're kind of guessing, Mike, that it was just coming in. Can you come to us Tuesday?
I'll be in training on Tuesday. I might have to ask Drew to help out with that if he's available Tuesday afternoon.
All right.
Okay, so somebody will, I'll have you work that out offline. Mike, Drew, and Jill.
I have no idea.
And Brian, so
Yes.
we'll have you
We'll
work
take
that
it.
off
Yes, we
offline.
will.
And okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Drew.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is TBD. Let me write this down. Okay, committee reports. Is there anything from the committees Other than, now I know there's a capital committee on Tuesday, but other than that,
That came up because we met today. We were just going over planning for next year.
okay,
But
good.
we meet again Tuesday, so if that helps.
Joanna, anything from your side from CRAC or CRC? Is Joanna gone?
No, I'm right here. We,
Oh, okay, sorry.
we finished our report and I believe it's been submitted to Brian. And I'm not sure what, is he the one who then submits it to you or how is that working?
So CRC, typically it was always the chair of CRC came to FinCom, but Brian would get it scheduled for us together with the chair. So
I'll work with Jer, I'll. reach
you
out
work
to
with
Jericho
Jericho and,
tomorrow, yes.
okay,
Yep, and I will, look in my email, and if I have it, I think I have, Joanna, did you approve I think I had a draft,
Yep, we
did you
approved
approve
it.
it?
Yep, we approved
Okay.
it.
Okay, then if I have do have the final, I will make sure the committee gets that in
Perfect.
advance of the meeting.
all right, and we don't have it scheduled yet in any case, okay. All right, again, March 10th, gonna be here really late. The
We'll get you through it. don't worry.
the anything on CRAC, Joanna?
No.
Our Island Home, we've had
I can't say that.
discussions, I don't think we need any more of
Yeah.
that one. And nothing else with capital other than planning for next year and now
Yeah.
talking about the Tom Never Spike Path.
Yeah, we have town council study committee meeting tomorrow. We haven't met in like a month, so.
Okay, all right.
And then
That's
Thursday is.
committee, so the meeting on Thursday has been canceled, again, down to me. I'm making lots of mistakes this season.
No,
Planning board.
No, that's March 13th. Not February 13th. So, that I know.
Small detail.
Yeah, just
Now we can all.
a month early.
Master plan meeting.
Yeah, so there is the master plan meeting, which we could go to if we want, except if we're more than a quorum there, we have to not talk to each other. That's the rule, okay? You can go, just don't talk to each other.
Not planning to talk to each other.
Okay.
Let's go, not talk to each other.
We don't like each other.
I'm just telling you, I'm just telling you what the rule is. Yes, we didn't have any, as I said, the opening part of this meeting, I somehow didn't have anything scheduled for the 13th and the two budgets that we have to go through, solid waste and school, that just doesn't work, obviously, with a day and a half notice. Any other business?
So we have nothing on Thursday.
The meeting is canceled on Thursday, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then, no other business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Jill
Second.
made the motion. Wait, I gotta call your names. Peter,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Jeremy,
Aye.
Rob, Joe,
Aye.
Stephen,
Hi.
Joanna.
Hi.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much. As
Thank
always,
you.
thanks for all the great discussions. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you.
Nice to